My name is Sean Brown. I'm a director on the board of the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 92nd career series session on upskilling and reskilling. We really hope that when we get to number 100, it will be in person. But for now, and since 2009, we've been running our career series in partnership with Keystone Partners, which is Boston's leading executive coaching and career transition firm. And as I said, we've now held more than 90 events, and they featured a wide range of experts, both from Keystone, MIT staff, faculty, and alumni, and other thought leaders to share best practices on this really important topic. So now I'd just like to briefly introduce our presenter, Dave Denaro. Dave's a vice president at Keystone Associates, and he's the leader of Keystone's Burlington and Nashua offices. He works with executives in career planning and transition, and he's coached hundreds of clients. He's also worked as an in-house recruiter and as an executive search consultant, and he gave an amazing talk on negotiating offers the last time we had him, and we're delighted to have him here today. Dave, it's my pleasure to turn things over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean, and good evening to everybody. It's a pleasure to be back. I didn't realize the talk on negotiation was so amazing. So we're going to work back through the process today and figure out, how to make sure that you're skilled up enough to be able to be in a position to negotiate in the future. We'll see if we can tie the two workshops together a little bit. But, this is a very interesting topic. It's very topical today. You see a lot about upskilling and reskilling in a lot of the media today. The funny thing is to talk about this, it's kind of the end of the journey. It's sort of the end of the story, if you will. We have to take a little bit of a trip or a little bit of a drive to get to, upskilling and reskilling. So that's what I'm going to do through the course of this presentation. We have to kind of start at the beginning here. Let's get to my next slide. So the first thing I thought we'd do is just make sure we're all on the same wavelength in terms of terms. So managing your career by upskilling and reskilling. Managing, okay? What we're going to talk about a little bit into the presentation here is about measurable execution, right? When you want to manage something, or I'm sure you're all in business in one way, shape, or form, managing something is the execution of a plan, and it's something that either is on a timeline, or it has goals, or it has metrics. So when we talk about managing a career, we kind of want to get on the same wavelength as that. Reskilling is just skilling. Reskilling is the act of learning something. Knowledge isn't a skill. Knowledge needs to be applied. It needs to be applied over and over again. You probably know everything that I know about getting good at anything from writing to tennis to anything at work and in between. You practice the stuff that you have difficulty with more than you practice the stuff that comes easy to you, and you build skill. And in the work environment, as you do that practice, you also get something we call experience. But basically what we're doing is taking knowledge, practicing it, applying it, practicing it, and basically turning it into a habit. Sometimes you can talk about very experienced people or things that you want to be very experienced describe it as just a new habit. Here's one of the keys that I'd like to sort of bring to the forefront. Those two terms, managing and skills, we want to come at them from two different viewpoints. The company viewpoint and your personal viewpoint. All right. So the company that you belong to or that you do work with, will probably want you to skill up on various things, and it'll be for the benefit of the business. I want to emphasize in this presentation, that's all well and good, but you should have your own viewpoint. You should have your own idea of what a good career will be for you. You should have the same schema, if you would, too, of strategy, plan, and then managing that plan to execution that the company does. So any company of any size has a vision. They turn that vision into a strategy, sort of an approach to the business. They have a plan, which is the executable piece, the measurable executable piece. And then they measure if they are executing according to that plan so they can get to where they want to get to. In today's talk, I'd like to emphasize that I'd like to make sure that you as individuals have your own plan, and that they would have the same elements to it, that you would have a vision where you want to be in some time period or in some number of jobs away, that you formulate an approach to getting there, that you have a measurable plan, things that you can check off and look forward to do and do, and then you can decide whether it's happening or not. And so as we talk about, or as I talk about, having both of those points of view for the company and for you, that's the drive that we're going to go on, because there's no way to tell you what skills you should or should not have in the abstract. There's no way to say what skills you should have or shouldn't have unless you know what destination that you want to get to. And so you're in the driver's seat in this presentation in particular. The idea of what to skill, what to upskill, or what to reskill, it's really going to be up to you. And hopefully you'll get that point pretty clearly by the end of the presentation. Okay, so your career from the company's point of view is part of the input that it has to produce its output, produce its business. I'd like you to think about what output you'd like for your career. So when we get to the idea of what's in it for me, I'd like to say that the reason that is this, I think it's so important for you to all think about things this way is one around timing. If you told me that you want to get ahead at work and you already have some goals, great, we can keep on that conversation. If you tell me that you love your job just the way it is, you can't think of anything other for the future that would be better than doing the exact job that you're doing right now, I'd say that's great too. But what I would try to emphasize is that everything moving forward from today on that's related to your career is going to change. It's all going to change over time. Things sometimes happen very slowly. Occasionally, we get the feeling that it's happening pretty quickly. I can tell you that, because I've been around for a little bit now, that when you look back on what's happened, it all seems like it goes by at lightning speed. So business is constantly changing, whether it's because of the economy, because of automation, because of the tools, lots of things make it change. Here's why you need to do this. Here's what's in it for you to think this way. It's because companies change faster than people. Okay, companies can change their strategy. They often don't change their vision, but they can change their strategy fairly quickly. They certainly can change plans pretty quickly. And if they require skill sets that quickly, there's no way that you can switch in time to go on that journey with them. And I'll explain that a little bit further as we go on. But companies can change quickly. People take a little bit more time to change their skill sets. And so that's why you need to be in advance of the curve. That's why you need to have your own plan so that you are changing things to the end that you want. So let me ask a sort of a rhetorical or hypothetical question. How long do you think that it would take an individual to get 5 years of experience at something new? So let's say that your company's changing gears. You need to get more up to speed in something very different from what you've been doing. Okay.
Well, these are MIT alumni, and you could double the amount of working hours and do it in 2.5, right?
You could do that. You could work. It's 120-hour weeks. That's true. But my idea here is the answer will be it'll take 7 years. So if you want to get 5 years experience at something new, it's going to take 7 years. And yeah, it would depend on what it is. 2 of the years would be to actually retrain. 2 of the years would be to build up the skill set necessary to make a pretty decent switch in some kind of career. And the other 5 years would be obviously to get the 5 years of experience. Why do I pick 5 years experience? Because when companies change and they decide they want to do something different, a lot of times they need people that have expertise in that subject. They need a core group of people that have expertise. They typically go hire those folks. They usually don't hire 1 or 2 year people when they're trying to make this switch. They hire the typical mid-level person. If you look at all job descriptions that are out there, it seems to me to be the typical mid-level is 5 to 7 years. I joke with some clients that I have sometimes. If you see a job description that says, 2 to 3 years, that's a pretty junior person they want. If you see 5 to 7, that's your typical mid-career person. Executives tend to come in at, 9 to 10 to maybe 12. You don't see any job descriptions that say 18 years experience required. I mean, you look in the job postings and they tend to bucket in those 3 areas for junior, mid-career, senior level people. So that's why I picked 5 years just for this particular example. If you wanted to be a lawyer, you'd have to go back to law school, 3 years training, 5 years to get experience. If a company wanted a 5-year experienced person, it would take you 8 years to get there. Doctor would be even longer. Some careers obviously going to be in shorter. But my point is, it takes you time to turn. The company can decide to turn much quicker than it takes an individual to upgrade. Let's look at a real life example that I found in the paper just a little bit ago. Wall Street Journal, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, had a big article about how GM, and by the way, GM's not the only one, I don't mean to be picking on them, but GM, Toyota, Ford, Honda, they're all committing to design, to only sell rather, electric cars by the year 2035. Okay, the article went on to say that, that over the past couple of years, the mechanical engineers on staff, of which there are hundreds in each company, have been really quite busy. They've optimized the gasoline engine to a fantastic degree. I'm a little bit of a car nut, so I can remember even just a few years ago, a very high-performing V8 engine would put out something like 200 horsepower. Now, a very high-performing V8 engine is 700-800 horsepower, and it gets the same gas mileage, and the performance is tremendous. So those mechanical engineers were on their game, and they were super busy. Okay, company announces, we're not selling any gasoline engined car in the future. Takes years to develop an engine. So that basically means that all the mechanical engineers that were working on designing new engines, 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, 8, whatever it is, there's no more investment in that. They have no more work to do. Literally, the article said they have no work. Some of them are forced to take early retirement at 58, 59. Some of them are going to try to do something else. These are people that are going to, have a tough time to switch to the job that GM and Toyota and everybody else wants now, battery packaging engineers. So the question, if we applied the question to mechanical engineers at GM, would be, how long would it take you to get 5 years of experience as a battery packaging engineer, an electrical engineer with 5 years experience? Well, it's going to take 7 years. I mean, it's going to take a few years for them to get electrical engineering expertise and then battery expertise. But if you look in the marketplace, nobody wants a 1 or 2 year battery packaging engineer. They all want a 5 to 7 year. Every single one of them. Volkswagen, Honda, Toyota, Tesla, all of them. So this was just an example that I just tripped across literally a couple of weeks ago that, kind of makes the point that I'm trying to make. You need your own career plan so that you know what skills you need to get to acquire in the future. You can't wait for the company to tell you, because by the time they tell you, it will be a little bit too late. GM is not going to take, they're a great company. I don't mean to, be putting them down at all. They are not going to take the hundreds, maybe thousands of mechanical engineers they have, wait 7 years to retrain them and get them up to speed. They would be unproductive for that entire 7 year period. Unproductive compared to Tesla battery packaging engineers, or VW, the other people that already have the 5 years experience. There's no company that would do that. There's no senior executive team that would allow it. There's no board of directors that would approve it. There's no shareholder that would put up with that. 7 years of being unproductive. So all of those engineers are going to have to go somewhere. There's maybe a handful that are going to go design battery packages, make the swap. The others, I really hope, that they have done what I'm proposing to you, that they have their own career plan, they have their own strategy plan, that they are executing it, and they know where they want to go. To stick with the car analogy here, your career needs a regular tune-up. You can't set it and forget it. You can't say, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a scientist, and think that skill set that you learned in school is going to take you all the way through a 35, 40-year career. You can look in the rearview mirror here. It's not happening to virtually anybody. Did GM, Ford, Stellantis, Honda, did they tell engineers, a couple of years ago this was going to happen? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I kind of doubt it. A company can change strategy in a couple of quarters. If they decide to do a fairly sizable layoff, it takes their HR folks maybe a month to do it. Sometimes not GM, but in some cases, people that we work with, they're completely shocked that their job has changed so much and they don't have the skills or they're not needed for whatever the reason. And they get 1 day's notice, right? The company comes and tells them that this is the change that we have to make. So companies can change in a couple of quarters, maybe over a month, notify people in a day. That is nowhere near time enough for you to construct a strategy, a plan, and execute it. So you're trying to make the case that it's up to you to do the steps that we're going to be talking about. Managing your career, to know what you want to get skilled up, whether it's reskilling or upskilling, knowing what you want to do is not a one session endeavor. It sometimes takes many meetings with some of our individual clients to go through and put their own strategy and plan together. Now I'm going to do it for you in one page. So it's clearly going to be at about the 50,000 foot level, but the elements are solid, right? The elements are the exact same things that we tell folks. You want to gain control of your career by creating a strategy, a focus on what you want to do and why you want to do it. If I can highlight those two words, if I can bold them and put them in italics, what you want to do is your strengths, right? Probably more soft skills than hard skills. Hard skills are the things you go to school to learn, or you read about, or you go to a class, you learn. Soft skills are the way you do, the manner in which you do things, basically your personality and personality traits. So what you want to do ought to play to your strengths, particularly those soft skills. Why you want to do it talks about motivation. It talks about the energy. It talks about the emotion that would drive you to stick with something and kind of dedicate yourself to it. That's your strategy. That's your vision, and your strategy is your approach. You then need a plan. Okay, strategy and a plan, you probably all know, two different things. So you need the concrete actions, the timetables, the measurable results needed to implement the strategy. You need to be able to collect data from the plan to see what's working and what isn't. Just like in business, sometimes your strategy is to do something, your plan isn't working, plan A doesn't work, you switch to plan B. You don't necessarily change the strategy, you just change the plan that it takes to do it. You need to track execution. I'm going to be talking to you about going to get your career, to actually to arrive at your destination, not have it happen by fate or happenstance. So you need to track execution. And as you're executing, you're going to use some of the data you get as feedback to decide whether things are working and if it's really going in the direction you want. So feedback is finally the step that's going to tell you what skills that you're going to need on this journey all through to the rest of your career. Okay. So let's talk about the strategy piece. We get those elements, right? Strategy. The top left of the triangle here with the star, that would be your strengths. Okay. I do a lot of work with clients that are kind of stuck on what to do next to get them to their top 4 or 5 strengths. I mean, I think I've seen a lot, and I think there have been some studies that say that people can be extremely successful in their careers, by being good at the variety of things that they need to be good at. And when I say good, I mean reasonably good, not even necessarily stellar, but there's always 3, 4, 5 things that they are stellar at. We see this especially in leadership development, whether it's Lominger or DDI or PDI. These are all companies that can assess your leadership capability and tell you that, you know, these are the 22 or 34 or 36 key characteristics to a good leader. And so what meta studies have shown, looking at all of these assessments and the incumbents who've taken them and their career trajectory, that you can't be awful at any of them. We call those career derailers, where somebody would refuse to work for you because you're not very good as a communicator, you're not very good at giving feedback. That's a derailer. But for all those 22, 32, whatever it is, if you're just average at all of them, save for 4 of them, in those 4 you were exceptional at, you would be one of the best leaders in the face of the planet. Okay, so playing to strengths is the sort of name of the game of this slide when you're thinking about what you want to do, play to strengths. The second term that I have here is why you do it. Well, that's the motivation, right? Motivation, I have a little trick that sort of a mnemonic to remember it. I say the word motion is embedded in the word emotion. So emotion puts you into motion. Emotion drives you. I generally tell folks to help them get unstuck. It's not the only way to think about things, but to help them get unstuck about what they want to do next. You already know what you're really good at. What would you love to apply that to? What would move you off the couch or from being unstuck? What do you care about most? So I'm looking for a feeling there. Okay, I'm looking for drive. I'm looking for what you would care most about today. Now, these days, that's the variable. Your skill set, your personality, they say, is fairly stable. If you wanted to change your personality radically, that's called psychotherapy. Takes about 5 years and about $50,000. And there aren't many companies that are willing to make you an aggressive person if you're a compliant person. So there are hard skills. Okay, those are teachable. If you need to know a programming language, or you need to know Zoom, or you need to know something, you know, anywhere from a few minutes to a few days, you get those, you get the basics, you get a certificate, you get that. So not caring too much about the skills pieces. When we want to know what you love to do, we're trying to think about what you love most. I had somebody say it nicely, and again, it's kind of a catchy phrase, but they said, do what you do best. Do what you do best to support what you love most. Right? I've tried to poke holes in that along the years, and it's hard. Right? Even if you said, I love my family the most, I'll take a job that pays well. Great. That's your motivation. That's all we're asking. Right? If you said, no, I want to cure cancer. I hate cancer. It's ravaged my family. Okay, hate. That's a feeling. Look this up once. There's 558 words in the English language that represent an emotion. I figure love pegs one end and hate pegs the other, and the other 556 are somewhere in between there. So what I'm looking for when I work with clients, I want the extremes. I don't want the meh. I don't want the ones in the middle. Okay, I want the things that really move you. You hate cancer? Great. That motivates you. Now, anybody could have a career that is dedicated to eliminating cancer, right? You don't have to be a scientist. You could be an accountant and work for Biogen, right? You could be an HR person. You could be whatever your strengths are. You would just apply it to the thing that motivates you. Okay. And then the third piece, which is in the upper third circle, which is in the sort of upper right, is people, networking. Okay, that'd be where you did it. It's fairly easy to figure out what your biggest strengths are. It's, in fact, fairly easy to be honest with yourself about what you love the most. Then when you go into the world to try to find what those two things, where those things overlap, they'll start to point to places. Biogen, Mustang, the different companies. You're going to start to talk with those folks and you're going to realize you fit in half of them and you don't fit in the other half. And what I mean by fit, what I mean by where is the people, the style, the management style, the culture. Does it fit you? So your career strategy has these three elements. What do you do best? What do you love the most? Where do those two things overlap? When you know those two things, you can start searching for a place where the culture allows the best of you to come out. Okay, it's a pretty simple little diagram. It is the core of how to think strategically, just an approach to your career. Okay, career strategy in 2 minutes. Love to have you think about, again, what you do best. The why would be your motivation. And write them out. Get them down on paper. Talk about it. Talk with others about it. That will clarify your thinking. You know as well as I do, when you have ideas, they seem like they're stellar. When you write them down, you see that there's disconnects, and it helps you fill in the gaps and join the sentences and connect the paragraphs. When you go to explain it to someone else, you'll see even more gaps. You'll get feedback. Try the same process with your strategy. There's no way to cheat. Talk to people that care about you and you care about. Talk to friends that have been lifelong friends. Talk to family. Talk to colleagues. Get that feedback about, what do I always talk about? What do you always associate with me? What do you think my best strengths are? By the way, if you ever ask anybody, what do you think my best strengths are? You have to tell them within the next 13 seconds. By the way, I'm not going to ask you what my weaknesses are. So don't freak out. Because everybody, as soon as you ask, if you say, what are my weaknesses, then the thing they're going to panic about is you're going to ask about what their weaknesses are. We don't care about weaknesses. We absolutely don't. If it's a hard skill weakness, you're going to learn it. If it's a soft skill weakness, then I'd have to ask you, why are you doing something that plays to a strength? Okay. The toughest part is, what do you love most? And to be honest, if it is a skill, if you love programming and you could care less whether you're going to program a virus or an antivirus program, then that's what you love. If it's helping disadvantaged kids, if it's building a successful business, you think about what has bubbled up since you've been about 12 years old. What have you been saying? And you repressed it and it comes back, and then you say, I can't do that. And it came up again, and somebody else said you can't do that. And it came up again. And sometimes the distance between these things is weeks. Sometimes it's months. Sometimes it's years. But as long as it keeps reoccurring, I would put some value in that and try to think about, how could I make it happen with my strengths? How could I accomplish that mission? Okay. So I hope I only took 2 minutes taking that, talking about strategy. Once you get the approach, the strategy, you have to put a plan in place, right? Strategy faces outward. What do you want to do in the world? The plan faces inward. How am I going to make it happen? Inward. Strategy goes out. You can get a lot of data. You can get a lot of market data. You can see what's happening in the world. That will help you form your approach. But the plan is inward. The plan is all about, what are you going to do? Okay. So the way I tell folks that I work with to think through this is, we have to think into the future. And I think long ago and far away, that most recruiters have tossed the question, what do you want to be in 5 years? Because 5 years became 3 years, and 3 years became a year and a half. And as you said, John, with MIT folks, you can have that time anyway. And so where you want to be in 3 years, and you're freaking out the interviewer because you're saying, not only do I not want your job, I want your boss's job in 3 years. So I tell folks, don't think in time, think in terms of roles. All right, so you have to stick with me here a little bit. I want you to think 3 roles from now. So if you think, right now I'm an individual contributor. My next role, I think I would do well engaging and managing people. I think I would do well bringing the best out of people. So I think I'll be a manager. After that, I think I'd like to manage managers. After that, I think maybe I'd like to create strategy for a firm. All right. So 3 roles out. not even by title, but by function. Remember, skills, strengths. Okay, that's how we're going to hook these two up at the end. All right, so if you can think even imprecisely, because it doesn't have, there's no precision in any of this, because things change so much. If you can even think 3 roles out fairly imprecisely, but you have an idea of what it could be, that's all we need, because we know where you are today, and we know where you want to be 3 roles from now, and now we can reverse engineer the steps that it would take to get from here to there. Okay, it's really no harder than that, conceptually anyway. So you're just closing the gap, and you're putting it on a timeline, and you're layering your life into it. So if you think, in the middle of this thing, I have a wedding, I'm getting married, or I'm having kids, or whatever, you layer it all in, and you can pack it all in and put the timeline in and put the finances in and the time, and that gives you a measurable plan. If I want to be a CEO by my 3rd job out, I know I probably have to be a C-level person before that, and I know I probably have to be a director before that, and I'm not. So now I know I got to be a director, I got to take this C-level role, and then eventually a board's got to approve me to be a CEO. You just reverse engineer that whole thing when you know where you want to be. The advice that I'd give you is, once you get that very loose plan in mind, you go out and you start talking to people that hold the 3rd role currently. So this is where networking comes in, exploratory meetings, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. You have to invite people to a conversation. So you can say, I'm here, I want to be like you someday, essentially. What advice would you give me? Where's the industry going to be in a few years? What's the future of your role going to look like in a few years? What advice would you give someone what would they concentrate on to be you in a few years? In the process of asking probably very, very similar questions to lots of folks that hold that 3rd role, you will start getting a trend in the data. Okay, you can't ask one person. If you ask one person, what do they think? You'll get one opinion. What if that opinion was off? What if that opinion was wrong? You can't base your plan on one data point. You need several data points that go in a trend. So if you ask 3 people, maybe 5 will, if you ask 5 people, maybe 3 will tell you things that are relatively similar. Well, I'd go with that. If you ask 7 people and 5 say something, if you ask 12 people and 9 say something, you get the point here. There's a secondary benefit to doing that. And that is that over the course of time, as you ask people that are always 3 roles ahead of you, you will develop quite a roster of contacts. So when you are a viable candidate, because you did pick up the experience you need to be a viable candidate for CEO, you'll have lots of former CEOs that would be in your camp. You'd have what we would call sponsors. If they were still in their company, maybe they're on the board in my fictitious example. Maybe they'd be mentors. Maybe you'd have 2 or 3 or 4 mentors. We generally call that with our clients your personal board of directors. I advise lots of folks to have a personal board of directors, to give them guidance, just like a board does, governance and guidance, to decide that they're heading in the right direction and they're executing appropriately. Okay, AKA a network. You would have the ideal network to become a CEO when the time comes, because you've created it in advance. They know you, they like you. Some people will stick with you. They're the mentors and advisors, and they'd be the exact help you would need to get pulled up, to get sponsored, to get nominated for the kinds of positions that you'd be looking for. Okay, so that was a lot longer than 2 minutes. I apologize. But the point is, figure out where you want to be, even loosely, reverse engineer it, and then start to talk with folks. This isn't a desk exercise. This piece is a get out there and talk, build your network, collect the data. They'll tell you the things that you need to know to figure out what skills you need to have, and lots more. Contacts, where the market's going, where the environment's going. Okay. Okay, so implement and manage. I said before, plan A sometimes works. Lots of times it doesn't work. That doesn't mean the strategy has to change. Just means you have to go to plan B or plan C. What changes to create plan B, C, any of those? Everything. The economy, the industry's vision, the strategy for most companies, the plan, technology, roles themselves, automation will impact it, outsourcing will impact it. Again, technology, processing. If I believe everything I read, someday in the not too distant future, the only job we will all have is robot wrangler, because apparently robots will do everything, except we'll need somebody to program and replace parts on a robot. I don't understand why robots wouldn't do that themselves. I think they're just trying to placate us so that we don't get all antsy. But your stage of life changes. You know, what you're doing, whether you're brand new in your career and you can absorb a lot of risk, whether you're in mid-career and you get lots of other responsibilities. I've noticed that banks usually like their mortgages paid on time. Car loan people generally like the car bill paid on time too. So mid-career, sometimes it's very tough to take on risky endeavors. But then families grow up, they get out on their own, and all of a sudden you've got time and maybe a little bit of money, and you can absorb a little bit more risk. So even your own life circumstances change. The thing that shouldn't change is your willingness to learn. Go back to what I said in the very beginning. Companies can change much faster than you can. You can't stop learning. You can't stop, even if you love the current job. You know, I love my job, but, you know, we don't use Lotus Notes anymore in my job. You know, we don't even use Word anymore. We're on Outlook and we're getting off of Zoom now. We're getting on the Teams. I mean, everything changes. Even if you just want to do the job that you've been doing for years, everything changes. You don't want to get left behind. If you become too deficient in the current skills, you're not valuable enough to keep around. That's the big danger. Okay, figure out your plan, implement it, manage it, ask for feedback. Don't wait for it, go get it. Ask people, ask managers, ask peers, ask the people in your network. Ask how they add value, how value will be added in the future. All kinds of questions about how did they do it, how should it be done, what's the future. Those are sort of the common questions. I coach folks all the time. Asking for feedback is your compass, right? It makes sure that you're still on your heading, because weirdly, your destination is moving a little bit as you're driving, right? It's changing, it's moving. So asking for feedback is the way to make sure that your heading is still accurate. Generally, I tell folks when they're looking for a job, networking is probably the way they're going to find it. So, you know, if you can have 5, 7, 8 networking meetings a week, that would be stellar. You get a job, please don't stop networking, even if it's 1 a quarter, even if it's 3 a year. Continue to network, continue to ask those questions about your field, the marketplace, how other companies are doing. That's your data to see how things are changing. All right, so finally we get to the idea of skills, which was sort of the premise of the whole presentation. But as I said, you can't know what skills you need until you can figure out where you want to be in the future, because it takes you time to skill up, but also be valuable with that skill, to have the experience that a company would consider valuable. So what skills we need in the future? You know, my answer to that is ask. You know, save for one skill, which I will close with. Your mileage may differ to keep on the automotive analogy. It depends on what field you are. It depends on where you are in your career. Ask, continue to do rigorous networking. You probably have a whole session on networking in the future, maybe sometime, but the idea of why you're asking questions, the idea of asking the same questions over and over again to different people, the idea of collecting the data and accumulating it and analyzing it, that's what is the heart of real good networking. So research, but also desk research, but also ask people would be the answer to what skills you need. Other than that, I don't know. I will say that your personality skills, as I said earlier, are the most stable. So if you're talking about other skills, you're probably talking about hard skills. You can tune up, you can get a little bit better at soft skills, but to go from horrible to excellent is in a soft skill is really pretty rare. That's why we always coach folks to start with what are you best at already. The whys change over time, but as I said, if you're asking, you're going to get data in all three buckets: the what to do, the why to do it, and the where. When to upskill. If you love what you're doing and you think I'm going to stay in this field, I'm going to stay in this vertical, you just need to know what the current skills are, not even current, the skills that are going to be most valuable to a company's strategy, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years out. So there'd be emerging skills. They're identified by the employer themselves. You can ask your boss, you can ask other people in other ends of the company. I find a lot of times, clearly marketing people know the direction of the company. HR people, particularly the recruiters, because they get to see competitors. They get to see other people that do the jobs, whether they select those people or not. They get a very wide range of what people are doing in what company. Sometimes the marketing people are smart enough to go to the HR people in their company and say, give me some intel on this company. Where are these, when you see these programmers that come from Google, what are they working on? So there's a real tie between the people that are in the marketplace for people and the people that are in the marketplace to understand, competitors. There's a real tie there. So ask both. Certainly media, lots of ways to figure out what the skills of the future in your present career are. But they're the ones that would add value. I guess if I had to summarize it once. When to reskill. If you're deciding you want to make a career pivot or a career switch, you're really talking about learning to reskill. Career pivot, go back to what you do and what industry you're in, what you do and why you do it, right? So your best skills point to roles you should do. Why you do it points to the industry or maybe the company you should be in, right? So a career pivot, we generally say, is one or the other. If you're going to stay a recruiter, but you're going to change industries, that's a career pivot. If you're going to stay in drug discovery, but you're going to go from being a scientist into marketing, that's a career pivot. You're keeping one stable and you're switching the other, either the role or the industry. When you're talking about a switch, you're changing both, right? You want to do something very different in a very different industry. You want to become an executive. You were a CEO, now you want to be an executive coach in a completely, somewhat different industry. You want to go from being an executive to becoming a professor. You're going to need a new skill set and you're going to need to break into a new industry. That's a switch. So that's obviously a little bit tougher. Usually it takes a longer time. You usually need to be flexible at what level you enter in a whole bit, because there's not a lot of value. There's not a lot that's immediate value. So the best way to do that is to really maximize your soft skills. And we coach, when we coach interviewing skills, to really make a big deal about what skills you are bringing to the table when you're talking about a job, even if it's just your ability to listen well, to coach well, to ask questions, to engage people, to work with any level of stakeholder, to analyze. I mean, those are all soft skills, right? Look for mission alignment. People are going to say, well, why do you, what are you bringing to the table? And the very next question out of the mouth is going to be, well, why do you even want to do this? A why question is a motivation question, right? A why question is not a skill question. A why question is a motivation question. So they want to know what's driving you. So if you say, well, because I've had it with cancer and I want to be part of the team that gets rid of cancer, that will make sense to them. Okay, now they know you're motivated. Their whole mission that's written in the lobby of their corporate headquarters where they put their mission, if you say you align with that mission, you're motivated to do that, now you've got mission motivation alignment. That's a big deal. It's one of the three big deals of hiring someone. You want to make sure they're skilled enough to do what needs to be done. You want to make sure they're self-motivated, and you want to make sure they fit in your culture. Those are the three big things that any recruiting process is going to look for in you. Okay. Look, if you're looking to make a switch and you're trying to figure out switch into what, be a little bit forward thinking about what the future of the market is going to be. If you're adamant you're going to be the best buggy whip maker that ever existed, great, go for it. Realize not much of a future market. I mean, whatever the market is right now is probably what the market's going to be. But, if you have a choice and you can get into, I don't know what these days, cryptocurrency, blockchain, automation, or you could get into something that's fading a little bit, I'd probably start exploring the former because it's got more headroom to it. It's got more long-range perspective. Okay, those are the skills you want to start to acquire to get you positioned. Remember that third job out schema, where if you know where you want to go, it helps direct what skills you need to get the second job. It helps you figure out what to volunteer for, what projects to get on in your current job, so that you have a chance of getting to your second job, so you can pick up the skills you need to get to the third job. That's kind of the staircase methodology to the third job out piece. All right? Turning knowledge into skill is really pretty simple theoretically. You need to learn something, then you need to practice it over and over and over and over and over again until you can say it's valuable. It produces something of value. Again, coaching clients, we often remind them, this doesn't have to happen at work. You have to be able to talk about accomplishments in an interview, which is typically a work setting, but those accomplishments don't have to have happened at work, at your current work anyway. They could happen because you volunteered to do it. You could have achieved something because you did it all by yourself. Lots of folks have started their own website, created their own blog apart from work. To become writers or to become authorities in their, whatever the topic would be. You could do it as a hobby. You could do it as a side gig. You could, like I think I said, you could volunteer for a place. We've often worked with senior executives that say they want to get on a board. We kind of look at board work as like work, if you know baseball, going through the different leagues. You have to start at AA, then you start at single A, then you go to AA, AAA, and then the majors. Well, there's lots of boards that are single A. They're great places. You could get skills. They're the Condo Board Association, the PTA board. Those are boards that generally are looking for folks. They're generally populated by people that are on AA kind of boards, and those people might pull you up to be into that league, that company, or that organization's board. And then you find people that are on two different level boards there, and they like you, and so they pull you up, or they recommend you or nominate you for another board. So to acquire skills doesn't have to necessarily be at work. You can do it outside your company. You could do it on your own. You just have to show what it achieved, what it produced. Okay, but the idea of practice, getting just the certificate that says you have the knowledge often isn't enough. You have to have produced something with it. Then you have to promote it. So the days, as we probably all know, of sitting back, doing good work, and hoping that your boss notices are long ago and far away at this point. You have to allow, you have to not only allow people, you have to tell people what kinds of work you prefer to do, what kinds of work would add the most value. When I talk with clients, I say to them, you and I both know this is all about you. When you're talking with your company, play along with them because they think it's all about them. Okay. So when you talk about what you want to do, make sure you frame it in ways that's of value to the company, value to the project, value to the end of your goals, value to their strategic plan, value to their vision. Same kind of cascading thing that we talked about before: vision, strategy, plan, execute. When you can tell a company you want to do something new, but it's a value to them to allow you to do it, you're going to get some response. Typically going to get some response. If you say it's just about you, what's in it for the company isn't there. Okay. LinkedIn is probably the best invention known to humankind for promoting yourself in the past 10 years, at least. So resumes are historical documents. There's not much you can do about a new skill to talk about how much you love it, how much you want to do it on a resume. Because a resume tends to look from today backwards. Not so with LinkedIn. One of LinkedIn's premises, you can talk about your future. That whole line, that big 220 character line underneath your name, you can put anything you want in there. It defaults to your title and your current company, but you can edit that. You can say scientist who, accountant rather, who is adamant about curing cancer. I mean, that was maybe a dumb example, but you can put your future goals in that line for everybody to see, including recruiters that type in the word scientist or cancer to pull you up, even though you're not yet a scientist or you don't even work in biotech. The whole about section, that's 2,000 characters. A lot of times when we have people that are making a career pivot or a career switch, we tell them, look, you have 2,000 characters. Use about 250 of them to talk about what you used to do. Use the rest to talk about what you want to do. You're still using keywords that are going to pop up via the algorithm. You're talking about what you want to do. Is it the same as having said, I've done it? No. But would it still catch the eye of a recruiter? Yes, because that's the way the algorithm works. Okay. So promote it. You can talk with folks. You can put it in LinkedIn. You can develop a commercial where you can say, this is, at heart, I'm a scientist, whatever it is you want to say, right? That doesn't mean I am one. It means I hope to be. But I just branded myself as a scientist. You heard that first. Okay, so that's the thing that's going to stick with you. Any new person that you network with, that would be a line that I would recommend you open with. When they say, tell me a little bit about yourself, I don't know anything about you. So at heart, I'm a, and always plug in what you want to be. Don't say, I am an accountant, but I want to be a scientist. Because then what they're going to hear mostly is what you told them first, I'm an accountant. And they're going to wonder for the whole rest of the meeting why they're talking to an accountant when they really need scientists. Okay, so promote it. Finish line. We're at the end of the presentation. As a recap and as a takeaway, what I would love you to do, and in fact, love you to share. Kids coming out of college can use this information just as easily as people that are segueing into semi-retirement and anybody between those 2 points. Okay, take control of what you want to be in the future. You take control of it. Know your what, know your why, and that will help you figure out your wheres, right? Because your what is your best strengths, your why is your motivation, the where is the organization and the people that align with those two things. You'll be able to create your own strategy from that, your own approach. You'll be able to then put a fairly detailed executable plan together where you can literally check off, I was meant to do this by August 12th and I did it, or I didn't do it. And that's on you. You execute that plan, you ask questions, you get feedback as to whether that plan is working. Maybe plan A is going great, but maybe it isn't. Maybe you need to switch to plan B to make sure that your strategy comes true. I tell folks a lot of times, look, we're all fairly used to now having a financial plan, right? A plan that at least has us understand what we should be doing to make sure that we can retire fairly comfortably. Treat a career plan, your own career plan, like a financial plan. You generally monitor it monthly. You get statements electronically monthly. All right, put that measurement in your own plan, your own career plan. You might talk with an advisor. Great, there's your board of directors or your mentors. Okay, you might look at it quarterly, realize that things need to rebalance somehow. Do the same thing with your career plan. Actively manage your career plan, and you have the best chances of ending up where you want to be. Very happy career, very happy life. There's really I'm not a big believer in a separate plan and a separate career. It's all one thing. It's all intertwined these days. I did say that there might be one skill that I would promote to almost anybody, regardless of what they did. And this is it, influencing skills. And the reason that I would coach anybody to improve, even if you're stellar, to improve your listening skills, your questioning skills, your ability to give and ask for feedback, right? You do all that, you're going to be engaging, you're going to be considered trustworthy, all of those things, listening skills, questioning skills, getting feedback, being engaging, trustworthy. That's what I consider influencing skills. Why do I consider that a key skill? Because you could be a genius at what you're doing. If you can't get anybody to follow along with you, if you can't get anybody to execute, it's a dead idea. It's not going to go anywhere. You know, the whole idea of a manager is to get things done, to manage things and get things done. If you can't get anybody that will follow your lead or your direction, it's going to be a very mediocre product at best. If you're a leader and you can't get people to get motivated and do and engaged to do what your vision is, the vision's not going to happen. So to get what you want often depends on your ability to influence others to behave in a very supportive way, right? To get what you want depends on influencing others to support you. Life might be considered to be one big feedback loop. You react to people, they react to you. So then it dawns on people, if I want them to react a certain way, I have to react a certain way to them. It's just one big feedback loop. So if there was one skill that I would say that most everybody that I've encountered would admit that they could get better at and maybe should be better at, it's listening, questioning, getting and giving feedback so that you can be engaging, so that you can be trustworthy. I hope that at least in the past hour and some odd that I've answered the question, you know, how can you decide what to upskill or reskill? I told you in the beginning, it's the answer to that question is the end of a process. It's not just an answer that I could give you. I tried to take you through the process as quickly as I could. I know it was a high-level flyover, but I hope it helped to some degree. I'm happy to stick around and answer some questions if anybody has any. But otherwise, thank you very much for your attention and for inviting me to these sessions.
I actually have one, and I work with Dave, if that's okay.
It's going to be a tough question. I know.
Are you going to keep working with Dave?
I was wondering if you would repeat the motion emotion phrase, because it struck me, but I couldn't scribble it down fast enough.
Yeah, it's just a little, not quite a mnemonic, but pretty close. The word emotion, feeling, has the word motion in it.
Right.
Or you could say it the other way around. And so emotion, a feeling to do something, is what puts you, it's what puts you into motion. It's what we call motivation.
Feeling.
It's a feeling.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. You can love, like I said, family, you can love money, you can love winning, you can love, like I said, it's really tough. It's really hard to poke holes in when you use that as one of the anchors to your career. What do you love most, or what three things do you love most? You can combine them all. The key is that it's what you love most, not what someone told you to love most.
Yeah.
It's what you love most.
And actually, I have a question, because I've heard other people say this before, and I don't know if anyone else on the webinar would feel similar. Like, how do you go about asking people what your strengths are? Is it something, you ask family, obviously, for some things, but to ask colleagues is without it being awkward, or maybe I'm the only one who thinks it would be awkward to go up and say, Sean, we've been working together for several years. What do you think my strengths are? So I do coach folks to ask that, and I tell them, do an informal 360 around yourself. Pick 3 or 4 really good best friends, 3 or 4 family members, 3 or 4 colleagues, because they all see you slightly different ways. And and if you don't believe that, just
I'm sure everybody in this call can recall friends that have started to talk to your family, to tell a story that you don't want to be told. So you're telling them to be quiet, right? So they see you in different lights. But I tell people, write it down, do a 360, tell me what 1 or 2 or 3 word answers. What do you see as my top? So I'm working with this crazy coach is how I frame it up. He wants me to do this as an exercise. What are if I said, what are my top 3? And they're probably personality strengths. What do you think the top 2, 3, 4, or 5 strengths are? And you're looking for a pattern. So I did have one client that every time he got one that was a repeat, he said, no, I already got that one. Give me another one. And we ended up with like 102 strengths, which misses the point completely. You're looking for patterns. You're looking for repeats. The other, if you want to be a little bit more subtle, sometimes I tell folks, ask them what people, what do they associate with you the most? So the word associate. So, you've seen me at work. Where do you associate with me when you see me walk down the hall? Well, hard work, always deliver, whatever it is, and you can translate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, does that help?
Well, and Dave, I think one other thing that may work for some folks is their prior reviews, right? Mm-hmm. So if they've got prior reviews that identified specific strengths, at least in the context of the role that they're in or have been in, right. That can also be useful because sometimes that is a sort of syndication or synthesis of what other folks have said. But you had said best friends, loved ones, and colleagues. Were those the 3 groups? Yep,
those are the 3 groups because they see you in life situations all the time. And you're absolutely right, Sean. People at work, would be good people to ask you. Reviews obviously come from people at work. The only caveat I'd put on that is if you're not in a job currently that plays to your best strengths, they may never become apparent to your boss.
Yeah.
Right? Which is one thing where this is what we're trying to steer you out of, right? If you're in a place where you're doing good work, but it isn't a job that plays to your best strengths, that job may never call for those strengths. That's why your boss would never see them.
So one of our attendees mentioned the book Strengths Finder and that it's quite useful in terms of assessing. Any others that you'd recommend in addition to Strengths Finder?
Yeah, for a long time, we've used Myers-Briggs. You do have to do a bit of translating. You have to be a certified practitioner to really get the readout on it. But anything that is an assessment that has some validity to it, Strength Finders is great. It's as good as, I understand none of them are 100% perfect. Strength Finders will give you your top 5 strengths. You're going to disagree with one of them, probably, maybe 2. But that's because the validity and reliability of these kind of psychological instruments is only that good. They're only in the, reliability is only in the 70th percentile for the best ones. But they're good enough for directions. So any kind of assessment, I've used Strength Finders before, I like it a lot. Myers-Briggs is pretty good when you're with somebody that can interpret it pretty well. Principle U is a fairly new one that's out there. The guy that runs Bridgewater, why is his name escaping me? Ray Dalio. So it's free. I've taken it myself. I've looked at I've emailed them and asked for their reliability, validity figures. It's if you go on Principle U, you can look at it. That's a pretty accurate one, I think, too. It's Adam Grant and Ray Dalio are co-conspirators. I'm putting that one together. So that's a pretty interesting.
Yeah, and Adam Grant, has written a lot too. Thanks for sharing that, Brett. On behalf of our attendees, myself, the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association, thanks again for another great night and for sharing your time and insights with us. And thank you to everybody who joined us from around the world. So details for all of our events are on our website at MIT Sloan Boston. And we really, again, appreciate your time. Wish you all a safe and wonderful day or evening. Thanks again and take care.